Welcome to Stop the Fight. And today, we're recapping this weekend's Canelo victory over Billy Joe Saunders. Let's go!
Don't brag about taking my side piece! Don't brag about taking my side piece, though!
I broke my back. Back is broken. Spinal.
That shit is strong, man. Good boy,
We did it again. We did it again. We lost the fight again. Well, we lost the bet. What happened? Well, we were right in the sense, like our observation was right. My observation was right. Billy Joe Saunders had the faster feet, could definitely box on the outside, and actually through 8 rounds was more than competitive with Canelo. After 8 rounds, I had it 4-4. I gave the first round to Billy Joe Saunders. I gave the next 2 to Canelo. And then I gave the following 3 to Billy Joe. So going into that 8th round, I had a 4-3 for Billy Joe. And of course, Canelo would then later catch Billy Joe with a nice uppercut, breaking his orbital bone. Billy Joe survived the round but retired on a stool. Now, what happened in the fight? Well, what happened was Billy Joe was able to land quite often on Canelo with his jabs. Quite often. But like we said, he did not have enough pop to quite bother Canelo. This is why the Billy Joe by KO was never an option. If Golovkin and Kovalev couldn't get him out of there, Billy Joe's a little feather-fisted he definitely could not have. Canelo didn't seem to be doing much damage to Billy Joe when he did land. So Billy Joe's chin was pretty good. It was his orbital socket, his actual cranium, that seemed to give in. What can we say about that? This can happen. Canelo is a very strong puncher. We have said this before. He's a very strong puncher. These kind of things can happen. I thought Billy Joe was handling the punches well that he was receiving from Canelo, but he didn't quite tactically fight the right fight. Oftentimes, he found himself under the ropes, and at times with no way out. Thankfully, Billy Joe knew how to grab on, but I think obviously the ring played a role here. Canelo enforced the 22-foot ring. While 24 feet would have definitely helped Billy Joe, Canelo, as we can see, he's able to walk you down well. Golovkin has the same type of a skill. You're not just going to be able to circle as easily as you'd like. Though, when Billy Joe was laterally moving, Canelo had a lot of problems. Now, the commentating team on DAZN, I give them a lot of props. They saw it as well. Billy Joe was able to land his southpaw jab and move. And when that was happening, Canelo's slower feet could not quite keep up with Billy Joe. This is what I was expecting. But, we saw the judges' scorecards. One of the judges did give Billy Joe 3 of the first 8 rounds. I thought that was the lower bounds. I thought he clearly won rounds 5, 6, and 7. I thought very clearly, and I thought he definitely took round 1. So, a little bit on that lower kind of variance range of what you could give to Billy Joe, but the other 2 only gave him 2 rounds, which was, I thought, ridiculous. And this is why I didn't want to take Billy Joe by decision, because I thought there was, frankly speaking, Canelo's not losing a decision unless it's like an extraordinarily successful boxing fight by the opponent, like Calzaghe did against Jeff Lacey. Something like that. That's when you can see Canelo losing a decision. But these closer rounds, no way. And we saw that. There was no way Billy Joe was going to win that decision. But I think the rest of us can now see that if like a b-ball, if you have fast feet and you can throw a jab, then you could take rounds from Canelo. You don't just have to be a Golovkin who can outfight him, or a Kovalev who can really keep you at the end of the jab. Well, actually, Kovalev, that's that, but his feet weren't particularly fast. Kovalev's at least not the Kovalev that Canelo fought. But a mover, somebody who can move laterally consistently with a decent chin and a good jab, can really put the work on Canelo, can really force a close fight. And we've seen this with Canelo before. We've seen the Lara fights. We've seen in the second Golovkin fight when Golovkin actually chose to box, going backwards. That was another fight. I thought that Canelo probably took that fight really close. A draw was possible. Hell, Golovkin could easily won that second fight as well. But we saw that Canelo could be troubled by a smart boxer. Canelo looks great when he's allowed to counter. When the other guy is moving in a linear fashion, back and front, like a railroad track, Canelo's going to look great when the other guy's afraid. But when you have a slicker fighter, a slicker boxer like Billy Joe, a southpaw in this case, you saw through the first 7.5 rounds, before the uppercut lands and breaks the orbital, you saw that Billy Joe he was absolutely faster on his feet. And he was able to confuse Canelo. Well, not so much confuse him, but he was able to keep Canelo turning. And Canelo's slower foot speed was not able to keep up with Billy Joe. So Canelo had to find other spots. And using his obviously very high ring IQ now, he was able to cut off the ring extraordinarily well on Billy Joe Saunders. And this is how he made those opportunities. There were numerous rounds, especially rounds, I think, 2, 3, and 4, which Canelo took. He was able to time Billy Joe. I think Billy Joe was just standing at the wrong distance. Like, he would wait for Canelo, and you can't wait. Like, he would stand there in the pocket and then throw a jab and kind of stay in the pocket, and it was all sorts of no. You can't do that. So I think Billy Joe made a few tactical mistakes. That's not why he got knocked out. That's not why his orbital bone broke. You're gonna take shots in a fight. There's no way around it, especially against a master at this point, a master boxer like Canelo. It's just the luck of the draw. The orbital bone, it'll break sometimes. Now, people are saying, well, Billy Joe quit. Based on what I'm hearing, the news that I'm hearing of his break is that it was a quite serious break. And when you break a bone in the face, obviously we've heard that Arthur Abraham against Edison Miranda, fight from almost 10 years ago now. Arthur Abraham's jaw was broken. He was able to finish the fight. Well, you really put a lot at risk when you choose to continue a fight with a broken bone in the face. And I'm not even talking about the nose, which gets broken quite often. I'm talking about an orbital. He could have suffered life-changing consequences from continuing the fight. I do not blame Billy Joe Saunders for calling it a day on that stool. It wasn't really a quit. Not in the same way like you see some other fighters just say no. Like the first fight, Aguilera and that. In the first fight of the card, the heavyweight. That was like a quit, nice acting job. Or the Redbach fight from the Ben Askren undercard. That was a quit. This was more of you need to understand where your health is at. It's not a quit if the repercussions from continuing is lifelong damage to your face, disfigurement, the loss of an eye, or God forbid, even worse. If this truly is an orbital break, like we're hearing, then Billy Joe Saunders, he caught an unlucky moment. Canelo is a very strong puncher, and these things can happen. So, again, how do we go forward? Now, we did lose this bet, but I think our intuition was correct. We were right to say that Billy Joe would be faster on his feet. We were right to say that if you can laterally move, and then if you can box about 5 times the level that he boxed against Lemieux, he can have a chance at winning. He didn't box at that level. He boxed at approximately the same level as he boxed against Lemieux, which seems to be Billy Joe's actual limit, but that was not enough against Canelo. Canelo would have taken that fight going away anyway. I just thought Billy Joe would have survived to get to the decision where he would lose. Now, another thing is you saw Canelo figure out some of Billy Joe's distance gaming. And I think Billy Joe was getting lazy at points. He seemed to be hanging out in range. And this is where the problem was. He kept ducking the same way. It almost looked like it was a matter of time until Canelo would catch him with the uppercut. But fighters are throwing the uppercut now. The uppercut, like, when I trained boxing, we were taught basically the uppercut is thrown only at, like, in close range. You practically never throw the uppercut at any other point. It's basically a shot. Now obviously this is the Eastern European school of boxing. You're throwing basically 3 punches: the straight left jab, straight right, and the left hook. That's basically what you're more or less taught to throw. And of course it's limiting, but the idea here is you take away the riskier shots, the shots that have a low percentage, let's say low connect shots, and that leave you defensively vulnerable, and you just stick with the 1-2 and the occasional 3, right? Now, you're starting to see it's like the comeback, the comeback of the uppercut. You know, we saw it with Povetkin versus White 1. We saw it with Gervonta Davis. You know, the uppercut is back, baby. Like, you know, it's a very eye-catching shot. You know, when someone gets knocked out with an uppercut, it seems like their lights go out. It's especially when they don't see it coming, they don't anticipate it. It's an almost always a one and done, or kind of like a one and like the fight has changed from that point on. So I guess it's nice to see the uppercut from Canelo. And again, I want to congratulate Canelo. Though we were wrong and we lost some money, I think our intuition was right. And again, our mode of thinking is correct. We're trying to make money here. We're trying to find a hole was where to make money. To say that Canelo wins the fight, okay, cool. Go ahead, put it down at minus 1,000 or whatever the odds were, minus 700. Like that's absurd. You know what I mean? If the orbital doesn't break and you have neutral judges, do you think minus 7,000 is it fair? Probably not. Probably not. As going into after the 8th, even after that bad 8th, I had a 4-4. You know, and it could have actually been 5-3 in favor of Billy Joe. You know, that was an even fight with Billy Joe having some what I thought were clear rounds that he was winning. If he continues boxing at that pace, you have a 50-50 fight after 12. If the fight continues at this pace. Now, of course, there's a lot of ifs, and that's not the way it turned out, but we have to figure out where we can find the play. So what kind of an opponent was Canelo going to be vulnerable? Now, I know the first thought is, oh, well, you know, if jabs are a problem, we want to think about Andrade. As a matter of fact, he got into a big shouting match with Canelo in the post-fight. Now, I think Andrade would absolutely not be a good opponent for Canelo. I mean, for Andrade to take that fight. Canelo will be fine with that fight. As we saw with his last fight against Liam Williamson, Andrade just slowed down just a little bit, and he was vulnerable to the right hands that Williamson was throwing. He even got stunned a couple of times. So, if a lesser fighter such as Williams could land and stun you numerous times with right hands, not particularly fast ones either, I think that Canelo would walk through Andrade. Now, I don't blame Andrade for wanting to fight, and Canelo says, you want to get paid. Everybody wants to get paid, baby. This is prize fighting, of course. Of course Andrade wants to get paid. And can Canelo fight him? Sure. Will he? Probably not. I mean, Canelo himself said, you fought nobody. And this isn't Andrade's fault, really. It's just that where he's at on the zone, who he was with promotion-wise, there really is nobody for him to fight. Nobody's going to take it. And I've said this before. It's the Lara situation a little bit. When you are a good, fast southpaw with a little bit of power and good boxing abilities, nobody wants to fight you unless they have to. Why? Well, because you're low risk, you're high risk, low reward. Very easy to get outboxed and look foolish and derail your career. So no one wants to give you that opportunity. So Andrade is kind of stuck, aging into the point where someone will fight him. But at that point, it'll be a slightly diminished Andrade. And as a matter of fact, I will say it already, Andrade has slowed down just a little bit. He's moved up in weight. He's a little bit older now, approaching his mid-30s. And at mid-30s, when you're going to start slowing down just a little bit. And I always say it, the punches that miss you by a millimeter in your late 20s will start to land in your mid-30s. And if you're taking right hands from Liam Williamson and you're getting stunned by them, Canelo will absolutely put the hurting on you. And if the fight is made with Andrade, I'm almost sure Canelo will stop him. He will absolutely stop him. Andrade seems to, I don't know if it was a gas tank issue with Williamson or if it was the fact that he couldn't handle the pressure or the pressure was getting to him. Well, Canelo, as we saw in this fight, is able to put on pressure for a long time. And very precise, accurate pressure. Not just walking forward, throwing punches, following you around the ring. No. He was numerous times he was able to corner Billy Joe Saunders just by proper foot positioning. You know, I say Canelo's feet are slower than Billy Joe's or slower than his other strong attributes, but it doesn't mean his footwork is bad. His footwork is exceptional. He's able to position himself. He's able to close off the ring the proper way. Billy Joe Saunders got caught in the corner a couple of times. the last place you want to be. You don't want to be walked into a corner. You want the opponent to be following you. Liam Williamson was following Andrade numerous times and was still able to hurt him. Canelo's not going to follow you. He's going to force you into a corner, and then Andrade, you're going to be in a little bit of trouble. So I believe that Andrade is not the fight for him. It's not, I can see why Andrade wants it, but guys, this is not going to be a competitive fight. I don't think so. So then who do we have? Well, of course, everyone's saying, well, you got to get that last belt. And that leads Caleb Plant. Now, Caleb Plant is a good undefeated fighter. But Caleb Plant has a similar issue to Billy Joe Saunders. A very similar issue. To stop Canelo from walking you down and knocking you out or hurting you, you need to have pop. Billy Joe Saunders, as you see, with a fighter who, if Canelo doesn't respect your pop, he'll just move forward. Golovkin forced Canelo back numerous times. In that first fight, Canelo didn't want that fight. You saw the second he started exchanging, started taking those Golovkin right hands, started boxing, right? In the second fight, he made the right adjustments, got a little bit better. Golovkin slowed down a little bit, and he was able to change his tactics. But in the first fight, he was getting outfought. Now against Caleb Plant, like I said, Plant is going to have the same problems. A different fighter, but the same problems that Billy Joe will have. He's 21-0 with 12 knockouts. That's a sub 60% knockout ratio. So you're talking about a fighter who doesn't have particularly that kind of oomph that I think will get Canelo's respect. So I don't know if there really is much of a shot. Now, he's taller than Billy Joe. Billy Joe is 5'10", 5'11". Caleb Plant is 6'1". That's another 2 inches. That means you can, forcing Canelo to throw up, you can box a little bit better. Probably a little bit safer for yourself. But I can't see him beating Canelo simply because Canelo can walk you down and can start hurting you. He fought, Caleb Plant fought Caleb Truau his past fight, and he wasn't able to get him out there. He won every single round comfortably, was kind of landing at will, but couldn't do anything against Caleb Truau. And that, again, is more indication that Canelo is not going to respect your power, especially because Truau was stopped twice. Anthony Durrell stopped him. Anthony Durrell was a pretty strong fighter. Daniel Jacobs stopped him. Those are strong punchers, but Daniel Jacobs was not particularly, he was competitive with Canelo, but Canelo was able to handle that power easy. He's going to be able to handle Caleb Plant's power. Can Caleb Plant box? I don't think he's as fast as Billy Joe Saunders. His feet don't look as fast. He has that weird kind of like quasi-Floyd style of the catch. You have to have speed for that. Everyone remembers think about James Toney. James Toney had that similar kind of like a Philly shell, right? James Toney got hit a lot. Yes, he had moments of defensive brilliance, but James Toney also got hit a good deal. You have to have not only, that's why Floyd doesn't just stand in the Philly shell. He switches up to high guard and uses his feet. Floyd is obviously a complete fighter. I haven't seen the kind of foot speed from Caleb Plant. Now, again, I have to watch more of his fights. But I haven't seen the kind of foot speed from Caleb Plant that will tell me that he can do what Billy Joe Saunders can do, but his face will survive. Outside of the fact that Caleb Plant is the naturally bigger guy. Billy Joe Saunders came up in weight. Caleb Plant has kind of been here. Early in his career, Caleb Plant fought at 160, but it was only his first 5 fights, 5-6 fights, and then he went up. He's a naturally bigger guy at 6'1". But I wouldn't think anything of these heights. Kovalev is around that same size. Cam Smith was 6'3" or something like that. Although he fought an awful fight against Canelo. But there's no guarantee that if Billy Joe, who is supposedly a master boxer or something like that, is going to make tactical mistakes and stay in the pocket and move in straight lines rather than vertically rather than laterally at points, then everyone can make a mistake. And Caleb Plant, like I said, if his foot speed is not there, he's going to be a sitting duck. You can't just Philly shell your way to from Canelo. And I think, with the Floyd Mayweather fight, if anything, that gave Canelo experience against a Philly shell, like the best Philly shell. They gave him that experience. So Caleb Plant, I think, will be in many ways a sitting duck. I'd have to watch the fight, and I will, obviously, if this fight is made next, I will absolutely watch a bunch of Caleb Plant fights to see what I'm looking at here again. But given from what I remember, his foot speed is not as quick as Billy Joe's. He's got the same issue with having a lack of power, relatively, guys, relative lack of power. And he, he every time I've watched him, he's looked pretty good. Is a pretty good fighter going to beat Canelo? Absolutely not. You need to be very good or excellent. Yes, you can argue Golovkin beat him, but Golovkin's an excellent fighter. One of the best fighters of the past 10 years. There's a reason why Canelo fought Golovkin when he fought Golovkin. And that reason is, of course, because you don't want to risk a hot prospect, the moneymaker. Canelo right now, he filled out 73,000 people in that stadium. Insane. He's a huge star. Millions upon millions of dollars depending on him not losing. Another reason why you should never take a fighter to win a decision against him. It's not going to happen. You saw it with Floyd Mayweather. Even the fights where you think he may have lost, they're never going to give him they're never going to take it away from him like that. Not yet, anyway. Canelo's got, he himself said he's got another 7 years in the sport at least. Nobody's taking close decisions off Canelo. It's not happening. So Caleb Plant's only chance is going to be, again, to kind of stop him or to really embarrass him. Based on what I've seen from Caleb Plant, he's not embarrassing Canelo in the boxing ring, and his knockout power is not there to put him out. That's a recipe for losing a fight against Canelo, and it's going to be our job, again, to figure out how does he lose it. Because just picking Canelo to win is again, there's no money in that. Again, guys, it's not financial advice. Please, you're all grown people. Please, you make your own decisions. This is not advice. And how we're going to structure our bet. Because at this point, I'm looking around, and at 168, 160, there's really nobody. The Charlos, they got the power, but the problem with the Charlos is that they both have that lunge-in style. That's a recipe for getting knocked the fuck out by Canelo. You see some absolute flaws out of the Charlos still. Very fast, explosive, powerful guys, but that kind of lunge-in, lunge-out attack. You see with Jamal Charlo, you're seeing it kind of subsiding a little bit. Obviously, the longer you fight, the more you train, the more you realize you can't just hop in and out like that, as you're just going to get timed and you're going to wake up when they realize what happened as you were trying to land your 1-2. Now, Canelo looks to be unbeatable around 160, 168 with the current crop of fighters. Again, maybe it's just I'm a little tired and I can't think, but who at 160, 168 is going to beat him right now? A third Golovkin fight? Golovkin's even more diminished. His performance against Sergey Derevyanchenko? I don't see it. So who is there? Danny Jacobs? He looked awful against Rosado. I think he lost that fight, right? He's definitely not gonna do it. So Caleb Plant is an undefeated fighter. And again, with undefeated fighters, they come in there, they're brash. And as you saw with Billy Joe, he's sticking his tongue out. He didn't care. The shots weren't really hurting him until they broke his skull. Until his orbital bone was broken, it's like he didn't care for the power. And honestly, I was watching through the first 7 rounds. I'm like, oh yeah, this is gonna be this is definitely gonna make a decision. But then welcome to boxing, welcome to Canelo. It's his show now. He runs this game. He absolutely runs this game. So I'm looking at 160. There's absolutely no one over here. Except for Jamal Charlo, who I would even consider beating Canelo. Golovkin's not going to do it. He's too old now. Demetrius Andrade, just explain why it's not going to happen. Munguia, if he fights someone like a Golovkin, it's going to get lit up so bad that no. Chris Eubank Jr., it just is not there. Arislandi Lara, again, he's a little too old, and Canelo's already beat him. He's not getting that fight. Derevyanchenko, he's not moving up, not getting that fight. So that pretty much takes care of middleweight. Who's at super middleweight? Well, you have Canelo with pretty much all the belts. David Benavidez, right? Everyone's saying. So you got Caleb Plant, David Benavidez. Because Cal Smith's already beaten, Billy Joe Saunders already beaten, Daniel Jacobs already beaten. Now, Benavidez, he takes a lot of punches. You see it. You saw in his last fight, he's vulnerable. He's not nimble. Part of that could be that he's still young, but he isn't particularly nimble. I'd have to watch more of his stuff. He's obviously a very powerful kid. Very powerful kid. He's also big. Not as big as Plant, but big. 6 foot. So maybe you can say that, oh, well, Benavidez is that fight. And they're going to market it that way. But that's probably the following May. That for Cinco de Mayo of 2022, that's a huge fight probably. But you have to make sure Benavidez doesn't lose. And Benavidez, he was against Ronald Ellis. He was taking a little bit of damage over there. His last few fights, you see his defensive flaws. Against Canelo, currently, I don't think he's ready for him. But we have to see. You also have to match him right. Maybe a Daniel Jacobs. Get him another name in there. Get his name up there. And maybe with Benavidez in Cinco de Mayo for 2022, you have a big fight. But I think next is Callum Smith, right? Caleb Plant. And Caleb Plant, like I said, I'll watch the fight and then we'll re-talk about it. But who else is left? The next is light heavyweight. And I don't think light heavyweight, like again, Canelo said he's not going up there. And I think we see really why. He's just undersized. He's not a big super middleweight. He's 5'8". He's not a big super middleweight by any stretch of the imagination. He's probably a small super middleweight. He's a straight up middleweight. He's just tanky. So Canelo at 160, there's nobody between 160 and 168, I think, that currently could really beat him. And the only 2 people he hasn't beaten, 3 people he hasn't beaten him, are Jamal Charlo, Benavidez, and Plant. Do you think any one of those really beat him? I mean, I guess, Charlo's probably got the best shot in terms of, what the ceiling is, because he seems to be more complete than the other guys. This is enough attributes. I think Plant actually does a better job than Benavidez. With Benavidez's defense, I don't see it as a particularly competitive fight. Again, I would rewatch these. I would watch more tape on these guys to make a more informed decision. But again, we'll see. And just to follow up on what I mentioned in the pre-fight, Tavares Cloud fought. He fought against someone who was 4-11, 4-10 at the time, actually. Ryan Soft, and he got him out in 3 rounds. It was an 8-round fight. And, that's what you expect a former champ to do to someone named Ryan Soft. So, again, I haven't watched it. I'm going to try and find the fight on YouTube if I could. If it's hopefully was videotaped somewhere, and I'll let you guys know what he looked like. But, again, that's going to do it for me. I'll see you guys on a Thursday. It's over.
I'm gonna go home and break my wife's hip.
Don't brag about taking my side piece. Don't brag about taking my side piece, no.
I broke my back. Back is broken. Spinal.
He's strong, man. Good boy. Just.